Hey there, everyone. My name is Ryan Schul. Welcome to my data science channel. So I've been considering, trying to do this topic for a little while. I finally have some bandwidth in my schedule, so I'm going to jump in with both feet. So the topic today I want to cover is how to create an environmental, social, and governance scoring system. This is abbreviated ESG. And basically, we can score companies based on different metrics, things like reputation, environmental responsibility, corporate responsibility, and sustainability types of metrics, right? So, one pillar is going to be environmental, one is social, one is governance. All around this creates sort of a reputation for the company. The environmental pillar is how a company impacts the planet, either positively or negatively, as you can imagine. The social part is how a company treats its people, right? Diversity, labor rights, community impact, things like that. And then governance, how the company is run based on the tactics of the board um, of the board, things like overall corporate structure, ethics, transparency, things like this, right? So an ESG score is a numerical or a categorical rating. The numerical can be 0 to 100, and the rating, the category can be A to F, just like a kid getting a grade in grammar school, middle school, or college, or something like that, right? So pretty straightforward. And these scores help with investors understanding the ethical implications of a company's decisions, long-term risks, things like companies' benchmarks, sustainability practices, regulatory monitoring, things like corporate responsibility, and consumer NGOs, as well as pressure for improvements if a company is lacking in any of these areas. So we're going to look at a bunch of metrics, then import some historical time series stock data from Yahoo Finance, and then see if these companies measure up to higher social, economic, environmental governance standards, and what kind of impact that has on their stock price. Okay, so this is a uh, pretty much multifaceted type of analysis. So in the first block of code here, first cell, these are called cells in Jupyter Notebook. I'm going to import some data from these websites. This is Microsoft.com, corporate responsibility and sustainability. If you look here, we have a link here. So this is what Microsoft says about itself, advancing sustainability. Not a whole lot, just like a pretty basic landing page here. But okay, so that is going to be the source for data. And all these big companies have this, right? So it's whether 10 companies, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 companies, right? So again, based on these companies importing this data from each of their own websites, and like it's probably a little bit biased, right? I don't think they're going to say, oh, we are absolute polluters on the environment and we don't care about social concerns and our government or our governance scoring is in the trash bin. Like, I don't think they're going to say that. They're going to be pretty optimistic and um, pretty like positive, right? It's going to have a positive message, but we're going to collect data from different sources as well, right? To try to make it less biased and more general type of analysis. So I think the code ran. I saw the hourglass in the upper left-hand corner here, finish up. So again, the data source comes from these websites. We're looking at different keywords. I am creating a dictionary with key value pairs. You can tell it's a dictionary with the curly braces. Here's the key and here's the value. So anything on the left-hand side of the colon is the key, right-hand side are the values. So we're looking at ESG, environmental, social governance, then looking at scoring each of these, right? Assign a scoring mechanism or quantifying the scores for each of these companies, right? And when we run through the list, we are scraping items off of these web pages I just showed you, and then creating some type of quantitative metric for these companies, right? So in terms of environmental, Apple got 0.6, 0 for Coke, 0 for Nike, and 0.3 for ExxonMobil. Social, 1.0 governance 0, and the overall average score for Apple is 0.533. For Amazon, it's actually negative 0.35. Let me adjust the screen here. So the environmental was pretty negative, and I believe it. If you buy something from Amazon and you don't like it, you send it back. They either burn it or throw it in the trash. I think they don't even put it back in the warehouse shelves to sell it again. So that's a huge negative mark for Amazon. And governance, they're getting negative 1.0. Now that's interesting. That's the only one on this list that got negative perfect 1.0. All the other governance are 0. So Amazon is really kind of in the tank here, and Apple is the top performer in this ESG analysis here, right? And I'm just sorting everything in descending order. If ascending equals false, then the ESG scores are in descending order. So Apple's number 1, and Amazon is looking pretty bad here. They're in the last place. Okay, so that's just one example. And I'm not saying like this is the holy gospel and absolute truth of how to do this. I'm going to take a few different approaches and show you generally how this type of analysis is done. But if you have your own ideas, as long as they conform somewhat coherently with these concepts I'm introducing, I'm sure it's going to be fine. Again, there's no like absolute right and absolute wrong, but you do have to understand the ESG metrics, and you use some common sense and use your own methodology. As long as it passes the litmus test of does this make sense, then you're good to go. And you'll have to follow my guidelines here, but I think this is a good system with guardrails built in, so you don't go off course. You hit the guardrail and you bounce back, right? So I think this is a good framework to work within. Okay, but again, it's not like it has to be done this way. So in the next example here, I'm going to look at, what is this? Okay, looking at ESG sentiment versus stock return. Okay, so this, I did this a couple days ago, so I'm kind of ad-libbing now. I have some notes that I'm going to use as a guideline, but I forgot some of the nuanced details of this because I did do this a few days ago. I'm just going back over my work now. So we're looking at Streamlit here. This is an interactive Plotly chart where you can zoom in and zoom out on the different aspects of the chart, and you put the mouse over it and you have the tooltip popping up. So ESG sentiment versus stock return. So let me see, the bottom 20% is going to be over here, right? Low stock return is over here, ESG for, this is, sorry, I even forgot the company that we're looking at. This is, give me a second here. Social governance. You know what? I have some more stock returns at the bottom. I think I was just playing around with something like that over there. Let me see. Because I think I introduced stock returns all at the end. Yeah, that comes at the end. Okay. So that was kind of out of order. Let me cut this out. We'll come back to something very similar to this a little bit later. So let me put everything at the end for the stock returns. So basically at this point, we've constructed a mechanism to go ahead and quantify the different ESG components of 10 different firms. Okay. We're screen scraping the ESG disclosures from each company website. And again, it might be a little bit biased. They're saying good things about themselves. I seriously doubt you're going to have huge negative revelations on that type of website, but it does give us a good baseline for what we're looking at. And actually, Amazon did come up pretty negative, and Microsoft was somewhat negative too. Oh, and Google too. So some of these big tech firms kind of are not really perceived as having very friendly ESG sort of profiles. And I think that's interesting. And let's dig into it a little bit more to see what else we can discover here. So again, we have the ESG entities, environmental, social, and governments. This is a key value pair. So this is the dictionary. And I'm going to do some basic natural language processing on this text. Okay. So we have the NLP library over here. SpaCy is pretty much the classic NLP tool to use over here. And the sentiment model is going to be sentiment analysis. So basically this shows us the overall sentiment, which means positive, neutral, or negative feelings that people have or customers have about these types of companies. Okay. So we're going to create a list right here and append items into the list. The ESG pillar is going to be pillar, keyword, sentence, sentiment, and then the score. So an example here is going to be, at Tesla, our commitment to renewable energy is unwavering. Okay, anything between the triple text or the triple quotes is going to be considered text. However, there are ongoing concerns about labor rights in manufacturing facilities. We believe that diversity is essential to ethical leadership. So now we're going to use this concept of scoring words based on the sentiment and the overall positive, neutral, or negative feeling, or I don't want to keep using the same word sentiment, but basically the understanding that this word has based on the tone or the language that it's constructed in these sentences, right? So the ESG pillars: environmental, this is social, this goes in the social bucket, and this is governance. The keyword here, why is going into environmental bucket is renewable energy, social, diversity, labor rights, social. So if you look here, so labor rights comes from here, right? Uh, diversity comes from here. Board diversity, that's that. Renewable energy comes from here, right? So we're taking a basic sentence, getting the ESG pillar, so we're parsing out the ESG components there, looking at the overall sentence, and then creating a sentiment score. So positive is 1, negative is -1, and if there's anything neutral, it'll come up as 0. There's no neutrals here, so we get a couple positives, I guess 3 positives and 1 negative. Okay, so the overall environmental is 1.0, governance 1.0, social 0. If we sum these up, we'll get a quick summary example of the overall ESG pillar and then the average score for each. So environmental governance, 1, social is, we had a positive 1 and a negative 1, so they average out to be 0. So that's why we get 0 there. Okay, so let's look at another example here. So go down to cell, run this from transformers, BERT tokenizer. So now we're going to use more of a sort of a AI approach, and a BERT tokenizer is going to take the text that we give it and then assign different labels based on the environmental positiveness of the message, the governance being negative or positive, and greenwashing. Okay, so which is the ability of the company to make it look better than it actually is, right? Like how would we get a definition? So greenwashing. Okay, so today, greenwashing definition. Deceptive practice by a corporation to convey a false impression or providing misleading information about a company's products or services to sound environmentally sound, okay, to sound environmentally positive, right? So that's what greenwashing is. So we're looking again for positive and negative feedbacks or clues or representations, either true or maybe misrepresentations that the company is broadcasting about itself. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. So we're using these BERT tokenizers. This is sort of like a LLM sort of tool. This one isn't so super powerful, but it's fine in this case. And it's a tool that will basically help us unpack the message in these basic meanings, the basic syntax that we have over here. We reduce our carbon emission by 20%. Well, to me, that sounds positive, right? How does the computer know that? You need a BERT tokenizer to basically convert these words into the same numerical representation of those words. That's a tokenization, and to assimilate or understand what these words mean. All right, so we want to know the meaning behind the word. So that's what BERT helps us with. But as a human, I can say this sounds positive, right? We reduced our carbon emissions by 20%. There are no women on the board. So that kind of sounds a little bit negative, maybe neutral. I'm going to go with negative though. We planted a few trees for a photo op. So that sounds kind of neutral. I mean, not hugely positive, maybe not negative, kind of in between. So I think we have 1 positive, 1 negative, and 1 in between. Let's see what BERT says. Control Enter to run this. Okay. And it's running now. Okay, it's going to go through 10 epochs. I put the training steps as 10 over here. So an epoch is basically a way for a large deep learning model, or maybe not really an LLM, more like a deep learning model. So TensorFlow, PyTorch, there's a few DL types of models that go through epochs. It's basically an iteration or a loop of a certain process, right? So it's going to loop 10 times and come up with the output based on each loop. And it's supposedly, with each loop, it's going to become better and better learning mechanism. That's why we do multiple loops, right? So in the first iteration, it's going to learn a little bit. On the second, it's going to learn better based on reinforcement that it achieved during the first learning increment or iteration, right? By the time it gets to third, fourth, fifth, it's using reinforcement learning techniques to learn better and better. And by the time it gets to the 10th, it's pretty decent at learning the task that we have presented to this, right? So the global step is 10. That's 10 times we do the loop. Training loss is 0.57. Runtime is about 30 seconds. Samples per second, almost 1 per second. Training score is 0.32. Training loss is 0.57, and epochs is 10. Okay, so it's okay. We trained the model, tested it, and it came back with a few basic metrics for us. So let's continue now. This next step, we trained and tested the model. Now we're going to make some classifications. Okay, so is this environmentally positive, environmentally negative, greenwashing, right? Which is the ability of the company to make itself look more favorable or more decent or more um, what's the word, virtuous maybe than it actually is, right? And we want something that's authentic from the company. What we want to understand what the company is truly doing, not that the company is doing something malicious, but they say they're doing something constructive, right? Like that would be an example of greenwashing, and we want to try to expose that or understand that, right? So the environmental positive basically is 0.69. We see 0.69 down here. Authentic is about 0.17. Environmental negative is 0.09. So not very negative, it's mostly positive. And greenwashing is 0.03. So my notes I have environmentally positive. Overall, the model is confident that the sentence expresses positive environmental sentiment. Authentic, there's a moderate confidence feeling that the statement is genuine. However, it's not conclusive. Environmentally negative is 0.95. Low probability that the statement reflects negative environmental behavior. I would agree with that. And very low risk of being flagged as greenwashing. So pretty honest, pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's look at another example here. And again, these are guidelines of how to do your ESG analysis. It's not the holy gospel, like you have to do that, but hopefully it pretty much makes sense. We're staying within the parameters of environmental analysis, social analysis, and governance analysis of these large corporations, right? To understand really how are they behaving? Are they behaving nicely or are they behaving badly, right? That's what we're trying to understand here. So we're going to create a data frame right here with Tesla and Apple, a date that some text was made or broadcast. This could come from Twitter. This could come from Reddit or Google News or any one of a bunch of different sources. Okay. So the Tesla aims to reduce carbon emissions with its battery supply chain, right? So we can see that in the text over here. Criticism arrives over Tesla's factory. Apple announces renewable energy plans, and then Apple faces backlash, labor protests in Asia. So this is just taking a basic data frame, and now we're going to do some ESG analysis on this. We're going to look at environmental positives, negatives, potentially, social positives, social negatives, and government positives and government negatives. So we have the data frame in the top here. We have the analysis in the bottom. This is the sentiment score. It's kind of jumbled up here. Environment positive 0.95, socially positive 0.81, governance positive 0.49. I'm going to take all of that based on the month and try to summarize that, or create a month basically in the next data frame, and then summarize that or break everything out because it's kind of jammed up here and it's a little bit convoluted the way everything is packed in here together. So I'm just going to try to just break it out and just make this a little bit easier to comprehend, right? So we have 2 entries from Apple and 2 from Tesla. Here's the month, right? And we have the environmental positive 0.9437. So environmental positive 0.9437 and then 0.0028. So that is 2301. But environmental negative. Oh, 0.11. Trying to get these dates straightened out here. So, oh, I see. Okay, so Apple is at the top. Now it's at the bottom over here. So it's a little confusing. It kind of flipped. I didn't sort it. Forgot to put in the sort. So it's sort of ascending or descending. So, okay, so now this makes sense. So 0.94378, so the environmentally positive for Apple on that date is 9437, environmental negative 0.002. That comes from over here. Social positive 0.72, that comes from right here. Social negative 0.01, so 1%. That comes from right here. Governance positive 0.47, so that's good. That comes from right here. And government's negative comes from 0.01. So that number is right here. Okay, so that's why we break it out this way. We just take it and just unpack that. We expand all the columns and get all the metrics under each column. So the way the sentiment score comes in, it's a little bit convoluted over here. Once you break it out, it's pretty easy. Okay, 0.94. This is high. This is high for Tesla, and that was in January. In April, it's almost zero. So there's really no positive influence at all from both of these companies. Environmental negative. No, now the negative jumps up in both these cases, right? Social positive 7.2, A1 that dips down to almost zero, negative, low, then becomes high, low, no, it's kind of high. That's like medium high. It's very high. And then medium high, low, 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 medium, medium, medium. Okay, so anyways, that's just a way to take the sentiment scores and break that out and unpack that into a data frame that's easy to comprehend and share with other people. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to assign some labels now. And again, look at another type of pipeline. This is a zero-shot classification using Facebook, BART, language, MNLI. I'm not even sure what that is. We'd have to look it up, but Facebook has a whole bunch of these models. If you go on Hugging Face, you can find a bunch of these models too. So I think I looked at this yesterday. It had like 1.8 million at this point or something like that. It's pretty remarkable. 1.8 million models. So these are all kinds of models that you can download and use to train and test. These are pre-trained models for the most part. They might be some blank space models that you can train yourself. They probably have some of those, but I bet most of these are pre-trained on a corpus of text or trained on images or audio signals or whatever the thing is, right? Like if you're looking at video, audio, if you're looking at text analysis, you would download the appropriate model just by searching for that. Let's see, text. See how many it comes back with here. 548. I thought it'd be more. You have 1.8 million. Only text analysis. It's curious there. Only 6. So not too many, but they have anyway 1.8 million. And you have to look at what these models do, right? Like text generation, there's probably a whole bunch of these, right? PyTorch, I've used that before, TensorFlow, Transformer. So you have a whole bunch of things to pick from. That's the point over here. So we have the labels. Let's go ahead and look at different corporations. So we have Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, Exxon, and Nike. Okay. And I'm going to search Google News for all of these companies. So there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to loop through a couple different iterations, go through different iterations of loops, and then append everything to this list I have called all articles. This comes from over here. You can tell it's a list with the square brackets. And then append is getting the company, the title, the date, media link, and then the description. So this is going to give us, I think, about 800 or so news articles from Google News. If you create a loop like this, you can get a whole bunch of articles. The first time I tried it, I just got, I think, 20 or something like that. Maybe it's 25. They don't give you too many if you just make a basic request. You have to make a looping request and then append them all to this list and then convert the list to a data frame. You can see here's the original list. It's blank. We are appending all the details. Then based on that, we feed that list into this data frame and then we view the data frame. So it's running right now. We should have some results in a few seconds here. Okay, so we got 250. I thought it was going to be a little bit more, but that's fine. 250 is fine. If we only had 20, I think the first time I did it, I only had 20. That's not enough to train and test these models on. You need at least a couple hundred. So we have 250. We're in good shape now. So this is the title, Accelerating Sustainability with AI. It was posted 6 hours ago, and this is the official Microsoft blog. Again, this is from Google News. Microsoft carbon direct release carbon dioxide from removal criteria. So that's okay. And actually, that's ESG Dive. So that's interesting because that's exactly what we're doing here. Environmental, social governance. This is ESG Today. So we have that. And then we have the news articles over here, right? So if we copy and paste that, we can see the actual news article. And then you have a summary or description of the article. In our latest Tech Talk, we sat down with Melanie Nakawaga, Microsoft's Chief Sustainability Officer. I'd love to have that job. It's never going to happen in this lifetime. I've given up on on all these corporate things. It's just not working out for me. We can't find the page you're looking for. So that looks weird because it actually gave me the link, but you know what? It might have got cut off because it doesn't extend far enough. So let me just say accelerating sustainability with AI, Microsoft. Let me just search for this, okay? So page not found, EU policy. Sometimes you can get after the backslash and navigate that way. Okay, so that's what it was. So Tech Talk with Melanie Nakawaga, and then we got the whole details over here. So yeah, this probably has to be cleaned up a little bit. If I get this one and then go up to the backslash, let me see if this one works. And it looks like something's coming up here. I think we've got a hit. Yep, we got it. Okay, so there's something a little bit funky. You have to get everything up to the backslash. And then, oh, it actually had something after that. Maybe you have to look for the last. Oh, I know. It backfilled that. Okay. So I think you have to get up to the last backslash and then use that as the URL, base URL or whatever. And then you can find what you're looking for. Okay. So maybe I'll do a video on that. That's not the topic that we're talking about right now. So anyways, Transformer Pipeline helps us understand the sentiment and how to get this ESG scoring system up and running and how to make sense of all this information, right? Like if I read this whole article, I could do that. I could spend 15, 20 minutes. No, I'm a fast reader. I could read this in 7 minutes. Okay. Then I would have to do my own ESG quantification, right? And then have to go to this article and do the same thing and go article by article. That's going to take the entire day, right? But if I use sentiment analysis and a pipeline that can help me understand the sentiment scores, then I can do this much quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and feed this into the algorithm and let this assign these sentiment scores for myself. So the first thing we're going to do here is look at the title and look at the label of the title. Based on the label, we're going to create a score and then view everything in the form of a data frame here. Okay, so it's doing the sentiment analysis right now, right? It's based on this pipeline sentiment analysis, and this is the model that we're using. So this is called Cardiff Twitter Roberta base sentiment. So this is something that's put up by Twitter. If we go back here and go to Hugging Face, I bet we can find it. Let me see if I can find it. HuggingFace.com, I think. No? Okay, so what is it? Hugging Face models. Maybe I spelled it wrong. Who knows? Oh, huggingface.co.models. Okay, so whatever. Okay, and I have the exact model over here. So this is the model. I can download, use this model, download it, or just reference it. Like this actually goes onto the Hugging Face platform, right, and fetches this model. You don't even have to download this thing. It's kind of sophisticated. It just goes onto the web and just makes a pitch or, a fetch. It just fetches this model, puts in the sentiment analysis pipeline, and then runs the analysis. And that's what we're looking at right now. That's what we're waiting for. So we should have a couple different types of labels. Okay, a label can be 0, 1, or 2. 0 is negative, 1 is neutral, and 2 is positive. So higher is better. 0 is nothing, or negative, and 2 is a positive sentiment. And basically the model's confidence score is given along with the label. So it could say label negative, maybe highly confident, maybe 90% confident, maybe 20% confident, right? So the higher the confidence, the more the more confidence we have that the model is performing appropriate, right? So we got the sentiment and the sentiment score. We had to do that 250 times, remember, because that's all the labels that we have or all the links that we have here. So the first sentiment came out as 2, that's positive, and the score is about 59% accurate. This is neutral, 74% accurate. This is positive, 52% positive, 50%, and label 1 is neutral, 79% positive. Okay, so here's the key down here, or the translation. Next, we can try to run a k-means clustering algorithm on the percent of negative, neutral, or positive, and then the average overall confidence, right? So again, sentiment is positive, neutral, negative. How is this text translated? How is it conveyed? How is it interpreted by human beings, right? Like when you're saying something, is it conveyed in a either positive, neutral, or negative manner, right? So that's what we're looking at here. And we have the percentages for each, and then for each company too. So we'll have the overall average confidence. Apple is 0.69, 0.7. So they're all pretty close right here, about 0.7, give or take, for all these companies. And then basically article A, B, C, D, E, this has positive, positive, the overall score 0.91. And essentially it's taking 0, which is negative. That's 1 out of 5 articles. So that's 20%. 2 out of 5 is 40. 2 out of 5 is 40. The average score is 91 plus 73 plus 45 divided by 5. So all these divided by 5. That's where you get the 0.62 from. So that's the 0.62 in that example. So it's pretty straightforward, but there is just some very basic math that goes on, behind the scenes to construct these average confidence scores. So the ESG persona is either green leader, social advocate, or weak governance, right? And based on the cluster that goes into, that's how it the description is interpreted. So highly positive is high confidence. Mixed tone is in between, and high negative is like obviously not good for any company, right? So we can go ahead and cluster these and assign them to a different cluster. So this goes to 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. We have 3 clusters total. So based on the average confidence, this, and this are all the same. This goes into its own bucket, and this goes into its own bucket. So this looks like the worst one. So it's off by itself in cluster 1. This is close to the best, but beat out a little bit by this. And I guess this number, this and this are close enough in approximation to get all into the cluster 2. So they'll all go into cluster 2. So let's look at a PCA, which is principal component analysis, breakdown of these different clusters. So we're going to look at the company, principal component 1 and principal component 2. So PC1 is the first slice of the component data frame over here. These are slicers. So we're taking the first one, and this is the second one, and we're going to plot the results. So that's what you see down here. So Tesla is off by itself. This is cluster 2, and Apple is ending up in cluster 2. It's actually, these two are clustered together, but represented on this PC1 axis, PC2 axis, slightly different. Microsoft is really by itself. That's cluster 1. Cluster 2 is Nike, and ExxonMobil is cluster 0. So I think Tesla, Apple, and Nike are kind of in between. So going on this basic vertical axis right in between, and these two are somewhat positive. Nike is a little bit negative down here in terms of principal component 2, but again, pretty much aligned with the middle line right here. Microsoft is kind of off by itself in the southwest quadrant of this sort of like metric breakdown over here. And ExxonMobil is in the southeast, off by itself, right? And based on the cluster and the principal component 1 and the principal component 2, this is how everything plots when it's laid out. So cluster 1, Apple, Microsoft, Nike, these companies are close to each other. Apple, Tesla, cluster 2. So it's actually Apple, Tesla, and Nike. Microsoft is cluster 1. So that's off by itself. And then ExxonMobil is cluster 0. Okay, that one's fine. So Microsoft and by itself, relatively close. They have positive or neutral sentiment, likely viewed as ESG aligned. Cluster 0. This is actually a text for this. This is a little bit screwed up here. Okay, I think Microsoft is right. And this is right now. This should be right. Okay. So there's a couple things out of order there. So Microsoft, isolated bottom left, likely has high negative sentiment, possibly due to governance controversies, and the test and the profile is perceived as quite different from peers. And MS is it? It's not capital, right? Soft. I think it's a lowercase s. And well, it's getting hot here, guys. It's getting hot in New York City. Bacon here. Cluster 0 is ExxonMobil. stands on the bottom left, bottom right. Okay, bottom. This is a little bit messed up. Bottom has higher neutral sentiment and some negative sentiment, possibly seen as ambiguous or transitional ESG perception. And these companies, these three, Tesla, Nike, and Apple, likely have higher positive or neutral sentiment and likely viewed as more ESG aligned. And these companies are relatively close to each other, right? So that's what the clustering is for. If you're similar to your peers, you're in the same cluster. If you're heterogeneous or different, you're in different clusters, right? So that's basically it. Now we can assign ESG scores to each of these companies. So we have the company grouping by the company and the weighted score, taking the average scores. So we have 0.27, 0.16, 13, 0.04, and ExxonMobil negative 0.10. That's why this one is off by itself, right? So it's kind of down there. Microsoft actually has a high ESG score. Apple, Nike, and Tesla go into the same cluster. They're cluster 2. This is cluster 1. I think Microsoft is off by itself and Exxon is off by itself. Okay, so let's look at another example here. Again, I'm just feeding you different ideas. Ultimately, you can take this in whatever direction you think it makes the most sense for your data and for your analysis. I'm just trying to be comprehensive in my approach here and how I handle this and treat this. So now we have the new sentiment. We're mapping label 0, 1, and 2 to a sentiment weight. So we have stock tickers to fetch because we're going to look at the overall ESG scores for each of these enterprises, right? We have Apple, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, Nike, Tesla, the stock ticker for each one. Okay, I recognize all these are all correct, and then the overall ESG score. So remember, Exxon was negative 0.103. That comes from over here, and Microsoft was the best at 0.274. So there's the 0.274. So we have all the ESG stuff up and set up and running. I'm going to get rid of this. This was just some notes I had. Now we're going to go ahead and fetch some historical time series data for each of these stock tickers. So we're going into Yahoo Finance. So Yahoo Finance has all this historical financial information. If we go over here, Finance Yahoo, and then go to one, I'll pick Microsoft or whatever. And look at the last 6 months just to see what's going on here. A little bit of a lag here. And it's like 100 degrees. That's not helping myself or Microsoft or anything in between. So if we go back 6 months, let me just see quickly what this looks like. Okay, no, already tells up 19% because you have that bubble that pops up. Year to date is what? Year to date, 19%, about the same, 12%, 5 years. Yeah, I should invest in this 5 years ago before the pandemic hit. And since it IPO'd 570, what is that, million%? No, 570,000%. Yeah, guys, I really missed the boat there. I missed that one. But anyway, so in the last 6 months, it's up 19%. Let's go back to the analysis over here. 6 months, Microsoft, we said 19%, about 18. It could be off just a bit by a couple of days. These guys are saying 19.09. We get 18.3. What's another one? Tesla down 24%. TSL. Let me look at Tesla. L. So negative 24%. Is that what we got here from Yahoo Finance? Negative 24%. Okay. Let's do a quick sanity check. 6 months. 22% is close. I think we're going off by a couple of days. And maybe it's counting today or not counting today. Because it's up 3%. It's pretty close, guys. Like, give me the benefit of the doubt. I can pretty much guarantee this is working. We're going back 180 days. That's why I know it's 6 months. We're looking at the closing stock price and pulling in all the reference data, all the historical time series data to get the 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month return and align everything to the stock ticker. So here's where the rubber meets the road. So we have Tesla that has an ESG score close to 0, slightly positive, and negative stock. So those two don't totally correlate. If this ESG score is lower, I'd say the stock would be lower. The ESG is kind of neutral, stock is down. This is up a little bit, and the stock is up 2%, not huge in 6 months. It's barely a blip. So Microsoft is up. That's actually the number one highest ESG score, 0.27, and they have the highest return 6 months. This is negative 0.10, slight positive 6-month return, almost zero, and this is 16%. So I think that's number two, and actually have a negative 6-month return. So that's interesting. In some cases, ESG score does correlate to a higher 6-month stock return. In some cases, it doesn't. So, so the takeaway is like, I mean, should you be environmentally friendly and socially responsible, and have a good corporate governance system? Yes, you should do all those things. Does it impact your stock price? Not so much. I mean, we see a couple cases here where there could be a slight tangential correlation or drive on the stock price, but maybe it's just coincidence, right? There's no real evidence. Otherwise, we would see higher 6-month return for Apple. This one makes sense. This one, I would expect a low or negative stock return. This one, I think that one makes sense. That's okay. And Tesla's about zero, and they have negative 24% return. So almost 1/4 of the stock's price was wiped out in the last 6 months. So I don't feel bad for what's his name, Musk, because he basically did that to himself. He got what he deserved, shooting off his mouth for the last 6 months. And the ESG score is about zero. So does it work? Does ESG score have an impact on stock price? Yeah, not really, not so much. And it's fine, okay, that we're just testing that theory. We're just testing the concept, and the hypothesis was originally it does have some impact. I guess in some cases it does, but in some cases it doesn't really. So here's just another view of the stock returns over time. Here's the bottom 20% of ESG scores, and the average return is close to zero. If you have a low ESG score, the average return is negative. The mid ESG score is kind of up and down. It's kind of bouncing a little bit. Again, high ESG score, kind of bouncing up a little bit, but kind of negative down here. So that doesn't really jive with any like high ESG score and positive stock return, but that's what we saw over here too, right? We saw essentially the same thing. It kind of bounces all over the place. There's no direct correlation between any of these ESG scores and stock prices. Again, 1 month down 2%, 2.3, or 2.8%. This is down 14% and up 18% for the 6-month return. So again, like, yeah, doesn't really work, doesn't really jive with anything here. So I don't think there's any kind of like strong conclusion. If you have a high ESG score, you have a positive stock price, or vice versa. It's kind of like almost random, right? It's almost random. And we're looking at 3 different returns, right? It's not just 1 month, not just 3 months, not just 6 months. We're looking at all 3. If I refresh this view down here, you'll see basically the same thing, just different colors, right? So anything that's positive is green, in between is blue, and the biggest negative is red. These are all negative down here. So this is kind of like within a certain threshold. So how they get that? If return value greater than 1, green. If less than -1, red, otherwise blue. So the blues are in between. And again, bottom 20% ESG, slight negative correlation. Well, not correlation, we're not looking at correlations per se, but slightly lower ESG, slightly lower stock return, low ESG, negative stock return, mid ESG kind of bouncing, high ESG kind of bouncing, and then top 20% ESG kind of up, but not huge up. But the higher ESG top 20% does have the highest 6-month stock return. So again, there is some slight nuanced relationship here, but nothing conclusive, nothing that I would use as an investment guideline to try to drive value from companies or try to make money in the stock market based on the ESG sentiment of any of these companies that we looked at. So I will end the video here. If you have more ideas, drop it in the comment section. If you want to look at different stocks, by all means, you can pick different stocks and different tickers, right? All of this stuff comes from where they get it. Starting over here for the investment stuff comes from, I think over here. I just assigned a dictionary items over here in Mapped Microsoft MSFT, but you can go online and get the Dow 30 and create another dictionary and have all the Dow 30s and then do the same ESG scoring systems and compare that to the 1, 3, and 6 month stock prices if you want. It's wide open, guys. You can do whatever you want here. I try to make all of these training, teaching sessions or training tutorials or whatever you want to call it. I try to make them pretty general and answer the question that I set out to answer, but make it general enough so you can take in your own specific data or modify the code to meet your own specific needs, or manufacture this to answer your own specific questions and do the research that you need to do to answer the questions that you need to answer, right? I'm trying to give you a guideline, just very general here how this stuff works, but by all means take it and pick up the ball and run with it and do whatever you want to do. Okay, again, if you have comments, post it in the comment section. I try to respond to all those. I try to read all those, and sometimes people say, "Hey, can you take a look at this concept or this strategy or this methodology?" And I try to do that. Most of the time, I can't do every single one, but I try to do that if I have time. So I'm bumping my head in 46 minutes here. That's kind of a long one. These are tending to go longer. Try to keep it under, but it never really happens that way. But um, it's always the next time. I can try it next time, right? So that's it. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks so much for your time. Hopefully this was enlightening and entertaining and useful for you. Give me some comments in the comment section, and I'm going to end the video now, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which I'm going to be dropping pretty soon. Goodbye for now.